Hello, my name is Vincent and welcome. In this episode we're going to be taking a look at my epic 40k Orc collection. Prepare for the greenskin onslaught, here at Bunker 6. Thank you for joining me on this very special Orc episode. This is the longest episode I've done by far, so I hope you enjoy it, get something to drink and get comfortable because we're going across every single edition the Games Workshop ever released for the 6mm scale in this Orc collection. Now, if you're not too sure about the multitude of editions, I'll try and touch on it throughout this video, and I've also tried to include in the graphics the edition from which every model was released. This game ran from 1988 all the way up to 2004, and in that time there were 4 main editions. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail in this video regarding the editions, but you'll see from the graphics included in this video I have tried to list the edition from which each of these models would have been released. Now, when I first started collecting Space Marines and Imperial Guard, I wasn't really thinking about playing any games with them. But they need an enemy, or an opponent, for when I eventually do, and so the Orcs seemed like a first great step in the Xenos and opposition department. They're wonderful sculpts across all editions, they're very intricate, very detailed, and very fun. They've got some amazing models from the Gargants to the Deathcopters to the Battle Fortresses, and I mean it, from every edition there are great sculpts, from the Infantry all the way up to the big mechs, and hopefully in this video I'll do it justice in showing you how great these models are. At the time of recording this video, I didn't really realize how many battle wagons I had in storage, and there are a lot. That's kind of why I'm doing all this talking in the intro. But as you can see, the battle wagon is basically a single chassis that is repeated across all of the battle wagons, and then you can change the turret or sponson on the top, and then you can change the weaponry on the front, from a roller to clasping arms to anything you want really, because they're the Orcs. You can loot, you can boot, you can do whatever you want. That's the great thing about the Green Plague. They love improvisation. And also, the other great thing about the Orcs is they have their own clans, and that's really great because you can really focus in on stereotyping particular visual cues that you'd find from each clan. They each have their own specific glyphs, they each have their own specific color codes, they have their own ideologies and cultures, which is really wonderful, and you can really express that through the way in which you paint the banners and their clothing. To give you an idea of how wide-ranging these ideologies and cultures are between the clans, let's take a look at the Snakebites and the Evil Sons. Now, for example, the Snakebites have an adverse dislike for technology and all things bolty and spannery, whereas the Evil Sons validate their entire existence by technology through speed and vehicles. Now, these two clans are two of many different clans that exist, and their differences are not only ideological, but expressed visually too. The Snakebites, for example, will dress and adorn themselves in leather and furs, whereas the Evil Sons adorn themselves in bright red and yellow garb and do the same to their vehicles too, the vehicles that they are very proud of. And unlike their suspicious brethren of the Snakebites, they embrace technology as much as they hope their enemies' faces do. Well, anyway, that's enough about the Orcs for now. Let's talk about these models. We've been looking at a huge range of battle wagons. We've been looking at the 2nd edition battle wagons and the 1st edition battle wagons. These are the 1989 edition, which would have come out just after the game Space Marine, which was released in 1989. Now, these 1989 battle wagons lack a lot of variations that the later version battle wagons had. They don't have the sort of multi-posal, multi-part idea going on yet. That comes later, but I still like the sort of bone and spiky quality of these models. They will all be painted, and because I've got so many of these battle wagons, I'll give a couple to each of the clans so we can get a nice varied range across all the different armies that the Orcs have to offer. Now, a little bit of info about the flak wagon. Of course, it looks very similar to the Hydra, and that is no accident. What Orc could possibly resist the idea of a 4-barreled weapon, capable of pumping hundreds of shells per minute into the air? Never one to let a good idea go to waste, the Orcs duplicated the Hydra quad autocannon design and then mounted it onto a spare wagon to produce a reasonably effective anti-air battery. With just a single Orc gunner in charge of the weapon's controls, The flak wagon does not boast the same degree of automated or accurate target tracking systems that the Hydra has. Nevertheless, flak wagons are a serious threat, and if you ignore them, you do so at your own peril. Not every single orc model I own is in this video. I ordered more models since this video has been recorded from the second and first editions that were missing in my collection, but we will be showing those off later when we get round to painting them. But back to the two models at hand, we have two orc scorchers that are driven by burner boys. And burner boys are orcs that have a very unhealthy obsession with fire, obviously, and anything flammable. And for them, the best thing that can ever happen is to be given a scorcher to drive around in. The scorcher is an orc flamethrower, which is a mounted turret on the back of a war track that is fed by a small reservoir of fuel towed behind the vehicle. Now, when I have a model which already came with a sticker, I won't be bothering to do the graphics because you can see what it's called. And this is our first forgeworld model of the day. And these are wonderful battle wagons which actually have little orkies on the actual gun turrets themselves. Now, one of the models is a little bit damaged where an exhaust pipe is missing, but we can recast it from one of the other exhaust pipes and attach it no problem with some epoxy putty. Now, I haven't removed the mold sprues entirely from the front of these models, so they look a little bit odd, but you get the idea. They're basically flak wagons like before, but they have that lovely forgeworld detail going on. And I must say, I feel that forgeworld put a lot more detail into the orc forgeworld models than they did on the Imperial Guard releases. That could just be me, but after recently reviewing the Imperial Guard, it really does seem to be the case. Although it could just be that Imperial Guard on the whole are less aesthetically exciting models, unlike the orcs, but the Games Workshop sculpts of the Imperial Guard models did have a lot more detail than the forgeworld versions, and I feel that the orcs have done a much better job of holding up their detail between the forum and Games Workshop releases. And speaking of the Orc Scorcher a minute ago, we are back with an Orc War Track. This is just the regular War Track without the additional flamethrower and reservoir attachment on the back. These guys are basically the same as war buggies, but instead of being on 4 wheels, they're on 2 tracks. Now, orcs love using these vehicles because they're light, fast, and they can run out in swarms, and they are hugely important. And that was the 3rd edition war track, but here is a 1st edition war buggy. Once again, as I mentioned, the details on these models are just fantastic. And this is a very old model. This model is nearly as old as me, depressingly. But never mind that, let's look at the rivets and panel lines, and even the little grille on the front. It's just a brilliant sculpt. I almost think that some of these models are like pieces of jewelry. They're just so beautifully intricate for their size. And here we have some war bikes. You can tell the age difference between them by their colors. The cream color is generally going to be one of the earlier editions, and the gray color is going to be one of the later editions. The models didn't really change much between the versions. The only time the models really changed for the war bikes was actually in the final edition, the 4th edition, when they went to just making metal castings of these models. And I learned from a very nice commenter that the reason why they changed this is because they didn't want to keep on printing the giant sprues in plastic. There were just specific models that they wanted to continue, and the most affordable way to do this was just by recasting them in white metal rather than clipping them out of a sprue using only partial amounts of the models rather than the entirety of the sprue. It makes perfect sense. And speak of the devil, here are the metal versions that I was speaking about. As you can see, they actually have a bit more detail to them. You can see there's rivets and actual wheel detail in those tracks at the back that are lacking on the plastic versions. They're fantastic models. I'm not too sure if you'll be able to see all those different details once they're on the battlefield, but when you pick them up, you'll definitely know the weight difference, that's for sure. Now, there is one particular model that I saw in the 1997 rulebook for Epic 40k that hopefully I'm going to try and emulate, which has got very long hot rod style suspension. It'd be really fun if I can do that. I'll probably have to do it with one of the plastic models rather than one of the metal ones, but we'll give it a shot nonetheless. It'll be a fun video in the future. Now, from Imperial Guard cavalry to these war bikes, you generally have to have 3 per base. That's why you only get 15 in the set. Now, a lot of these baggies don't say forgeworld on them, but they do come from forgeworld. You can tell by the colored resin. That is forgeworld resin if ever I saw it. Now these are very, very rare models. They're very hard to find. Not many of them were produced, and I'm very, very lucky to have them. You can find a lot of the gun wagons in metal, but finding these armored variants in resin is very hard indeed. But I got some nonetheless, and I'm very much looking forward to painting them with you. On to more rare resin. We have another forgeworld print here, and this is the Ork battle wagon, and this thing is ridiculous. The detail on this one is absolutely phenomenal. We've got the little metal railings, we've got the ladders, we've got the panel lines, we've got the rivets, we've got the articulation in the wheels. It's just brilliant. So brilliant, in fact, it's my favorite tank out of everything in the Ork range. Now obviously you can see there's a lot of additional detail and parts that are not attached to the main chassis of the tank, but we will be painting these in the future, and I cannot wait to get these finished. It's going to be so much fun seeing these on the battlefield. More forgeworld resin. This is the gun wagon with a zap gun. This is another rare variant. We've got two here. Sadly, I don't know who did the sculpts, and I don't know how much they would have cost. I know I mentioned a lot of that information in my Imperial Guard video, but I actually had a forgeworld catalogue to help me with that. I couldn't find a catalogue that had these models listed in them, but if you know which catalogue it is, I'll buy it off eBay and add any information into the YouTube annotation notes below. Now this is a series of models that I didn't even know existed until about 2 weeks ago, and I had to have them because I have to collect everything in each army. And these are the latest edition of the battle wagons. These actually came in Epic Armageddon packaging, and they're great models. What's quite bizarre is in some of the other sprue packs, they actually have models from all different editions. You'll have some models from the first edition that look like recasts, and then you'll have a couple of these very, very up-to-date models too. An odd choice of things to do, but I actually read in the Epic Armageddon rulebook that they say very clearly you can have models from all the different releases in an Ork army, which is pretty cool. And it does make sense for the Orks, definitely. And it's wonderful because we haven't painted anything yet, so we can get a really consistent theme going across all of the models when we do start painting. If there's one thing you want in any army, it's good painting consistency, and hopefully we'll be able to achieve that. Here are a couple more of the models that would have come in the 2004 Epic Armageddon Battle Wagons sprue pack, and as you can see, these are really small. They're almost like super amped up war buggies. I think that's kind of what they were going for. I love all the really random orky paneling going on, the riveting, and it was really nice to see such consistency across all of the final models that they released for the Ork range in the Epic Armageddon edition. Now, due to their size, they're hard to spot. I know that sounds weird, but if you actually look at the sprue pack they come in, they are mixed in with a bunch of varied tanks, so really keep your eyes peeled if you want to pick these up. Now, this is a model where I love the story behind it as much as I love the sculpt itself. This is a Weird Boy tower, and from what I can ascertain, they put the aforementioned Weird Boy into this tower, and these satellite dishes amplify the psychic energy that comes from this particular Weird Boy Ork and targets its enemies with unimaginable psychic orkiness. It also narratively makes complete sense because I think that the other Orks are uncomfortable around Weird Boys, and so putting them in a tower makes perfect sense at the best of times anyway. These weren't just single wagon-style vehicles, you could actually find a Weird Boy tower on the Space Ork Mega Gargant too. Now, I only have duplicated chassis here, but there are actually 3 variants, but they do have different track types on them and different tower types. I'm missing one of the towers, which has square satellite dishes instead of the circular type here, and I'm missing 2 of the chassis types and 1 of the track types. But I'll keep my eye out for them, and we'll paint them if I find them. Now we're going back to the old school. Here we've got some first edition lungbusters, and one thing I will say about each edition, the consistency between all of the releases is absolutely fantastic. If I was to put all of these first edition Ork tanks next to each other, they just look so cohesive. And the only way I'm going to really be able to match that cohesion and keep that cohesion going between all the editions really is through the paint jobs. So we'll try our best to do that. Now, I only have one of these gob smashers, and that's fine by me. Now, yes, I did have 3 of the lung bursters, but that was because they showed up in a lot. Now, I don't really care to own more than one of anything really, unless there is a variant of it, and there's only one variant of the Gobsmasher, and here it is. Now, I did mention that there are some models that will be missing in this video, but it's only because I ordered them after I recorded and edited this video, and they are all first edition models. I cannot wait to show you them. They're everything pretty much that I've got missing in my collection, apart from 3 Squiggoth models, which I'm still holding off on buying because I haven't found them at a good price yet. Here are some more of the iconic Ork tanks, and as you can see, that continuity I was talking about, the rivet and the panel lines and just the general aesthetic of these early tanks, they all work so well together despite having very different parts on them. One reason why this video took so long was all of these models were unassembled, and working in metal compared to plastic can be a bit of a nightmare. You go through a lot of scalpel blades trying to carve off bits of excess sprue, getting rid of mold lines and everything else. Now, I haven't filled in any of these models, but I had to glue all the models together because it was going to make it much more manageable presenting them in a video, much more visually interesting if you could see the models partially completed, considering none of them are painted. So I hope you didn't mind the delay, but as you can see, most of these models have been put together apart from the Gargants or anything that I am definitely going to be painting as a sub-assembly. If you're not sure what a sub-assembly is, basically it means you consolidate the amount of parts together that are manageable to paint, and a model like this, for example, the Speedster Bubble Chucker, is a very easy model to paint in one go because it's so small. But then you have models like the Gargants that are going to be showing up later in this video, and they are big. Now, big isn't a problem when it's plastic, but when it's made of metal, big becomes a problem very quickly, especially in managing how you paint the model. You have to be so careful. Paint literally slips off metal. It doesn't matter if you base coat it, it doesn't matter if you base coat it 15 times. If you even slightly touch a metal model the wrong way and you haven't varnished it 6 ways to Sunday, that paint's coming off. So you have to be so careful when you work with these models. That's why I generally advocate for sub-assembly painting, even in plastic. Now, that's because even if you're a very experienced painter, it's nice just to work on one specific area at a time. Now, gluing all your models together can be very fun, but it can also be very daunting too, especially when you realize there's certain areas that you just won't be able to get to now with the paintbrush because you've fully assembled the model. That can be kind of disheartening sometimes. So be careful, be patient, take your time, and enjoy the process. You gluing the gun on 2 days later won't make too much of a difference, and if it improves your paint job, why waste your time gluing a model on sooner to make a poorer result in the long run? Now, I love working in plastic, everyone does, because it's easy, unlike metal, and you can run into some problems with metal, for example, gaps. But these are easily fixable if you pick up some milliput, green stuff, or epoxy putty, or anything like that really, to fill those gaps, which we will be doing before we prime or paint any of these models. If we see a gap, it's getting filled. And I highly recommend using putty or anything that doesn't have shrinkage issues. Got to be careful of shrinkage, otherwise it's not really worth doing in the first place. You just don't really want to be left with all this kind of gunk around your model and that hasn't even solved the problem that you were trying to fix in the first place. You also want something that is structurally sound because metal can get heavy and you want those joints to be as strong as possible. That is also where pinning can come in handy too. Now, tanks like this don't require pinning because they've got lots of flat surfaces that all the adjoining model parts sit on or to, so a model like this doesn't have any structural issues. But if you're dealing with something like a Gargant or a Titan, you're going to definitely want to consider pinning. Pinning is just a very simple process of hand drilling and shoving a bit of a paper clip into 2 corresponding holes and then attaching glue to that. It just adds a little bit of extra structure rather than having 2 flat metal surfaces next to each other, only being bonded by CA glue. CA glue is great, as is epoxy, but one slight bump and they could easily split, and then you're left with a nasty repair that you're going to have to do and most likely ruin your paint job in the process. Now, one bone of contention that I feel that these 3rd edition gun fortresses and battle fortresses solves is the scale issue. You literally have an actual orc sitting at the right scale on this model in that turret on the back. And it's those kind of things that I really like because it stops breaking immersion. If I've got an Imperator Titan on the battlefield, I always have that nagging thing in the back of my head knowing it's just not the right scale. I want my 6mm models to be going into the legs of the Imperator Titan like they do on the front cover of the Titan Legions. But obviously that's not possible because the model would have to be substantially larger to make that seem realistic. But these models get it right. And talking about models getting it right, this is my most favorite of all the Gargants, the Steam Gargant, or to be specific, the Feral Orc Steam Gargant. Now, Feral Orcs are slightly different from the regular Orcs because they had their own range that was released as part of the Swordwind supplement. There was the Eldar and the Krieg range that was also released too. These models from all of the Swordwind range are very hard to come by, as it was part of a specialist game at that point, and not too many people were buying the stuff because you had to order it only online. I don't think it was available in shops. There was a specific website that you had to go to buy this stuff, which makes it very hard to come by. And if you thought the Gargants from the 3rd edition were kind of jank, the Feral Orcs take jank to a whole new level. The sculpts are absolutely brilliant in the sort of awkward and off-kilter paneling and riveting and jankiness all around. It's just so well done, and I just like the sort of snake-bitey nature of the Feral Orcs. And talking about things I really like this Great Gargant. This is the 2nd edition Great Gargant. There was a previous edition, but I wasn't really a fan of the head design, and I don't particularly care to have it in my collection. If it comes up at a good price, maybe I'll get it, but I don't really care for it. There is something so fantastic about this model, and I think that actually they did do an Armorcast version of this in full scale, which is pretty cool too. Now, excuse the white tack that you're seeing holding this together. This entire model is actually being held together by white tack at the moment, just for the sake of the video. It will all fall to pieces as soon as I put it down. But I wanted to show as many of the models as possible completed in terms of their construction, so it makes it more enjoyable to watch. So apologies for this sort of amateur delivery on this particular model and me not being able to keep the head on it. But we will definitely glue that head on at some point when we paint this model. It's going to be a lot of fun. If you have any ideas on which clan I should be painting this model as, please leave a comment below. Not all Gargants are created equal, and this Gargant was basically impossible to hold together with white tack because it has a very different way of having its chest area held together. The last version is sort of like a birthday cake where you've got 3 layers stacked on top of each other, which made it very easy to keep the parts together. But this, on the other hand, was basically impossible to hold together with white tack for long enough to make it interesting visually for the video. So I've got this giant metal bar rod thing, and I hope that it looks okay in the video. It's really easy to work with, and I think the results are okay. This is the Great Gargant, the big brother to the Gargant, and it's just got a bit more detail and a few more weapon loads out, and I love the head on this thing. It's absolutely brilliant. And I do enjoy all of these additional details that we are seeing on this model. And we will be getting this finished in no time at all. I've got so many ideas for this. I think I'm going to paint this in the Goth Clan style, but if you have any suggestions, please leave them below. It's models like this that really prove how fun Epic 40k is. You couldn't hold a model of this magnitude in your hand if it was a full-size model, but I just love the fact that you can have literally 3 Gargants and Mega Gargant and Super Mega Gargant in your glass cabinet, no problem, and it would cost you a fraction of the money, even with the ridiculous eBay prices on Epic 40k. These are the Orc Stompers. There are 3 of these, and they are the little brothers to the Super Stomper, which will be the model coming up next. I think these might be super sketchy recasts. I'm not entirely sure. The prices on them were pretty good at the time, so I'm assuming they're recasts, but they're very difficult models to get a hold of at the best of time anyway, so I didn't really mind too much. But it didn't say recast anywhere, and it didn't say Games Workshop anywhere either, so I'm none the wiser. They could be originals, they might not be, I have no idea. But they're really cute models, and I'm really glad I've got them in my collection. But those gaps are painfully large, and we will need to fill those in with some green stuff or milliput in the future when we do work on them finally. The big brother to the Stompers is this. It is the Super Stomper, and this features a super gun and a mega chopper. And the one thing that I love about all the Stompers is they generally try to make them look like orcs. Admittedly, you could say that Titan is a bipedal humanoid looking structure, but they actually put the real orky characteristics into the design of the Stompers, I feel, and I think that's a great touch. And the Super Stompers actually occupy a middle ground between the smaller Stompers and a fully fledged Gargant with an impressive array of weapons. And talking of smaller Stompers, sorry these aren't in order historically, but these are the 1997 edition Stompers, and you'll see that they're a little bit different from the first ever Stompers, which are seen here in the light cream resin. They actually don't have the gun on top of the chain blade, unlike the 1997 version. That's pretty much the only difference between the two of them. As we go on to the back of the model though, you get to really get a sense of how this model would operate if it was real. You've got your little trapdoor there, and you've got your little furnace and your roof tiles. It's quirky and silly, but it gives you the kind of narrative and contextual points visually that you'd need to really imagine that there is a bunch of orcs sweating away in there, pushing coal into the furnace and trying to keep this monster of a machine operational. And the reason we have Orc Stompers is because not all Orc warlords can afford to have something built such as a Gargant, which is much more grand in design and scope, and settle instead for a Stomper. Although considerably smaller than the behemoth Gargants, Stompers are still a well-armed and armoured walker and a fitting platform for a warlord to bellow orders at his boys from. Now, I must apologise, I've presented these models in quite a confusing way, but the two models at the front are Killicans and the two models at the back are Dreadnoughts. And while we look over these models, let's do a little bit of background on them. We'll start with the Orc Dreadnoughts. In a sickening parody of the rituals used by the Adeptus Astartes to entomb a mortally wounded brother within the sarcophagus of a Dreadnought, Orc Docks and mechs sometimes perform the same task on boys to wire them into the controls of an Orc Dreadnought. Fortunately for most Orc Dreadnought pilots, this is not always the case, and most Orc Dreadnoughts are controlled through a confusing array of levers and buttons. Although the end effect is much the same, with a pair of savage close combat weapons at their disposal and a couple of heavy weapons, Orc Dreadnoughts are virtually unstoppable once they get into close combat. A historical example of the brutality of the Orc Dreadnoughts was seen during the Hell's Reach shipyard assault, where 3 Dreadnought mobs descended on the Ironside docks. Their thickly armoured hides and heavy shooters easily outshot the lightly armoured Hive militia. The predictable result was a massacre of Imperial defenders, resulting in the Orcs holding the shipyards for several weeks until the Space Marines and Stormtrooper reinforcements drove them back out. Now let's talk about the adorable Killicans. The Killican is smaller and more lightly armed than a Dreadnought, but are nonetheless a dangerous foe in close combat. They're equipped with a deadly power claw and a big shooter. Killicans accompany Orc mobs in small groups, the Killican's armor providing reasonable protection against most small arms of fire. Although they have a rolling gait that can appear quite peculiar and ungainly at first sight, Killicans can produce a surprising turn of speed when their Orc pilot is sufficiently frenzied, a fact not always appreciated by the average guardsman until they have found themselves suddenly face to claw with one. The Imperial Guard infantryman's uplifting primer recommends the best tactic to use against a Killican is either to ram it with the armored dozer blade of a Chimera, knocking it over, or wedge a grenade into the leg actuators. It is not recorded who discovered the latter technique or whether they survived the encounter. And due to the fact that most of these models were released in the early 2000s, they're not actually too far off a lot of modern GW designs, and that goes for all the ranges. Now, this is a really fun model. This is the Mech Boy Gargant, and what I like about this model is it comes with different arms. Now, you'll see here that it comes with the Super Lifter arm, but there is also 2 additional variants that I'm sure I'll pick up at some point, and they are the Buzzsaw arm variant and the Crusher arm variant. Now, the Superlifter and the Crusher arms are also found in the Mega-Gargants, and what's so fun is when you've got something like the Mega-Gargant, which has all the variants already attached to it, you get to see how those smaller Gargants have stolen and taken some of the ideas from the biggest version and incorporated it in different ways into the smaller variants of the Gargants. And despite this model looking quite complicated, it's actually only made up of 3 white metal pieces. That includes the detachable arm. And this is the aforementioned Superlifter dropper arm. Now, the Superlifter technology is used on a speedster or dragster chassis too, and is also found on the Mega-Gargant as previously mentioned. But the other 2 alternatives are the buzzsaw arm, which basically looks the same, but it has a sort of spiky elbow and a circular buzzsaw, and then a crusher arm that also has a spiky elbow and then a claw attachment instead. Now, these are the cutest orc models in all the ranges in my opinion. These are the humble tin bots. I think they're absolutely adorable, and I think that they're supposed to inhabit an orc. I can't find any information about these in terms of rules or any descriptions. The only thing I can really find is a type of model called tin boyz, which is something entirely different, but nonetheless, very cute models. Now, this model is the Slasher Gargant. The only thing missing from this is the second head variant, but theoretically I could just buy a second Slasher Gargant with the additional parts. But I have both the loadout variants, and I'll probably magnetize this model so I can swap the weapons as and when I need to. Now, I say I'm going to magnetize the weapons, but because these are metal models, these parts are much heavier, and just creating a single magnet point at a pivot point is not necessarily going to cut the mustard when it comes to holding these weapons upright. We might need to get a little bit smart with how we do this. Now, this is a Mega-Gargant that I picked up super cheap off eBay because it was already sloppily painted and it required a lot of work to get the paint off. You've got to be very delicate and take a lot of time with these parts, generally soak them in chemicals for a long period of time, but very gentle chemicals so you don't actually destroy the plastics. But pretty much once this model has been base coated and had some work done on it, you won't see any of this stuff and it'll be a great model. I'm still juggling which army I want to paint this model as. There is a pretty cool model I've found in one of the White Dwarf magazines. It's got a very interesting color pattern for this particular model. It's got all different color patterns, purples, blues, and even some look like zebra stripes on it. So we'll look at that and see if we want to do that at some point. I already have a version of this model completed in the original box art style for the Bad Moons clan, and we will see how we go with this when we paint it. I'm probably going to get a couple more of these too because I like the idea of having lots of different clans with lots of different Gargants, like the Mega-Gargant. Now, I'm no expert when it comes to orcs or any of the armies particularly, I just like collecting the models, but I've read or heard somewhere that the mech boys merely will and believe the machinery into existence in terms of getting it to be operational. No one knows quite how they do it, and I don't even think they know how they do it either, but that's quite a fun part of the lore, just willing and believing into existence operational machinery. I think that's a very fun idea, and the fact that this willpower and belief is so strong that they can get things to fly in the air is even more impressive. Now, this is a bit of a random one, but it seemed like the perfect time to actually put it in one of the videos, as this box game actually contains a lot of the miniatures that we're looking at today. The only difference is there are the Imperial Guard Thunderbolts here that are obviously not in this video. But this is an Andy Chambers side game called Bombers Over the Sulphur River, and I always wanted this as a kid, but somehow I actually managed to find a sealed copy on eBay for about $30 last year, which is an absolutely ridiculously cheap price, and I'm very, very happy to have it in my collection. Now, this is one of 2 Orklanders that I own. The Orklanders are large transport aircrafts that are used to land orcs from orbiting spacecraft and to move them about quickly once they're on the planet's surface. Landers are a classic example of orc design, being huge, ungainly machines that are brutally efficient at the task for which they are designed for. Now, most people who've tried to take on one of these lumbering airships has got into a lot of trouble. They think they're easy prey for their sleek fighter aircraft, but however, while not nimble, the lander is immensely tough. It can shrug off damage that would send almost any other aircraft down into flames. In addition, the lander's hull is studded with numerous weaponry turrets that are capable of laying down a wild amount of fire against the enemy aircraft that get too close, as well as being capable of providing supporting fire for troops as they disembark. Rockets located on the forward hull provide additional firepower for use against armored targets. And to orky up these models a little bit more, I've put random gun sponsons on both of the hulls, and one has the mouth of the door open and one has its mouth closed. And here we have our first and only piece of forum wear in this video. There isn't actually too much orc forum wear that I've ever seen that I've been particularly interested in, but I really enjoyed the look of these deathcopters, so here they are. And here we have the official Orc Deathcopters released for 4th edition by Games Workshop. The Deathcopter is yet another example of Orc ingenuity to an almost pre-natural affinity with any kind of technology or machinery. They're built for speed. The Deathcopter can carry only a single occupant Orc and is generally armed with a big shooter or custom shooter. With its twin rotors keeping it aloft, the Deathcopter has proven to be a considerable menace to the Imperial war effort on Armageddon. Although not generally capable of taking out Imperial armor on its own, the distraction and harassment caused to infantry by the constant low-level attacks favored by their pilots have resulted in several defensive lines being overwhelmed by the lightning attack of a squadron of Deathcopters. Too small and agile to be engaged by conventional strike aircraft, the Deathcopters occupies a niche battlefield role that once again underlines Ghazghkull's innate grasp of military tactics. Now we're moving on to the gun platforms, and this is any type of gun that isn't attached to infantry or a vehicle, and these are created by boyz, a subcategory of Orc. And instead of having Space Marines and all the variants of Space Marines, Orcs have different types of Orcs that all have their own speciality and skills and interests. boyz is a generic term for those Orcs who show an aptitude for a particular valued skill other than fighting. Big mechs are quite possibly the most prized and command a sizable respect in their own right. Blessed with Orky know-how for anything mechanical, they're responsible for overseeing the manufacture and operation of the Orcs' numerous war machines, whether they be simple shooter or truck to Gargant and tractor beam. Pain boys, or docs, DOKS, see to patching up various injuries, or more often augmenting missing limbs and organs with mechanical ones provided by the mechs. Last but not least, all the slavers. These brutish Orcs keep the grot followers of a warband in check and ensure they're always at the front of the fight where they can catch the bullets. And here we have a series of squig catapults. These are found in the Swordwind rulebook, and they are able to lob large pots full of carnivorous buzzer squigs into the midst of the enemy. The pots crack open when they land, and swarms of the enraged squigs pour out to attack anything nearby. Buzzer squigs are voracious insect-like creatures that are capable of stripping the flesh off a man-sized creature in seconds. Squig catapults are made from a combination of wood, box girders, and scrap metal scavenged by the Orcs from crashed and wrecked vehicles. Any metal that is used is fashioned into girder-like sections, perforated with large holes to reduce the weight and bulk. Now here we have some Orc rockets. These are the 3rd edition. They are also some 2nd edition rockets too. I need to cast some additional rockets out of the spare ones that I have here, because not all of my platforms have rockets for them. There are 2 missing, but that's no big problem. Anyway, so these are very cute little models. I can't find any rules in any of the books for them, but here they are in all their glory. And similar to the flak wagons earlier, these are the flak guns minus the vehicle, and they're sitting on a platform instead. These are forgeworld resin, as you can see, and they have all the same sort of details of the orc on top, but just without the vehicle. Now we're going way back. Here we have the tractor beam, and the first time that the tractor beam was released was in the Epic Orc Invasion 1990 box set. This box set's quite impressive because many of the models actually continued being released through all the editions after this box set came out. For example, the Orc with heavy weapons was the same, the Warbike was practically the same, and the Orc boyz was practically the same too throughout all the editions since this box set. A few of the other models did change over time, for example the Wild Boys and Storm Boys, but it's pretty impressive how timeless some of the sculpts ended up being. You can see that the DNA of the tractor beam cannon has actually been transferred to these sculpts on the far left and the far right. They have very similar turrets indeed. The model from the center left and center right are actually the only 3-part models, the rest are all 2-part models. The models on the far left and the far right are tractor cannons, the models from the center left and center right are smasher guns, and the gun in the center is a regular cannon. These guns are manned, or orked I suppose you could say, by the smallest of all the orcs, which is the Gretchen, and generally speaking a single team of Gretchen will crew up to 3 of the guns at once under the supervision of a runtherd, or also known as a slaver. And the infamous grots, which are notoriously hard to deal with, are sometimes threatened with the prospect of joining a big gun crew by a runtherder in order to keep them more in line. And as you can imagine, orcs don't really have health and safety at the top of their list of priorities, and it's only a matter of time before a grot crewman who survives long enough will become utterly deaf and will have to resort to a rudimentary system of some type of sign language. Now we're moving away from the wheels and the wings and on to the teeth and the feet, with the giant Squiggoths and other ridiculous creatures the orcs call their own. Now I've already previously mentioned the Squig catapult, and that has insect-sized squigs. Well, the Squiggoth is on the complete other end of the scale. These are the largest of all of the orchioid creatures. Now these are the 3rd edition variants. Now the 2nd edition variant Squiggoths, they actually almost look more like boars than actual Squiggoths. They're covered in fur, whereas these look much more lizard-like and orchioid in appearance. And one thing that I really enjoy about these 3rd edition models is, despite the fact that they're actually oversized lizards, they're still covered in all this type of plating that keeps them very visually cohesive to the vehicles that also were released during 3rd edition. Now whether this is just by coincidence or not, it's a really nice touch. Now I believe this to be the rarest model I own, or at least the 2nd rarest model I own. It is a feral orc Orchiosaurus. And don't be fooled by its dinosaur-like name, this is actually still a Squiggoth. It's just the very largest breed of Squiggoth that exists. In order to get the Orchiosaurus as big as it gets, it requires a pig dock in order to feed it the right type of fungus and loving care to get it to such a giant size. And when I mean giant, I mean it's even bigger than a gargantuan Squiggoth. Now the very keen-eyed of you who know these models well will know that not all of the parts are attached to the Orchiosaurus presently. One, because the parts were very difficult to keep on with the white tack. Here are some of the additional parts. There are also a few more cannons that were in the bottom of my plastic box that I didn't notice at the time, so my apologies for not including them in the video. The reason why I said that the Orchiosaurus might be the 2nd rarest model in my collection is because potentially this is the rarest. It is a forgeworld resin gargantuan Squiggoth. These things are awesome. The detail on them is absolutely exceptional, and it's resin, so it's nowhere near as heavy and will hopefully be a lot more easier to paint than the metal Orchiosaurus. Now, all the parts aren't present in this video shot, my apologies, but they're just tiny little cannon parts, and I just didn't really want to have to take them out of the bag and white tack them on for just a short period of time. White tack and resin don't always go well together. White tack can sometimes be very tricky to stick to resin, especially if the resin hasn't been cleaned yet. And here we have some of the additional parts, as I mentioned, that I didn't want to have to stick to the model temporarily. We have the Squiggoths husks and a few other additional bits and bobs that will come out when we finally get round to building and painting it. Well, we've gone over everything orc related apart from the orcs themselves. So here we are, we're finally getting around to the infantry, and what you're seeing here is a slightly chopped up sprue which would have actually come in the Epic 40,000 1997 3rd edition box set. But if you didn't want to have to buy the entire Epic 40k box set at the time, you could have just picked up the Space Orc Mob box set, which just gave you the sprue that I just showed you and a vehicle sprue too. That vehicle sprue I don't have in its entirety, but I do actually end up showing every single model from that sprue in this video, apart from one, which is the Shocker attack gun. I do have a series of those models, but I didn't manage to get them into the video because I just got too lost in everything that had already been filmed. But they will obviously show up eventually when we get around to painting them. Now, these are the boyz, and as I mentioned earlier, these are the exact same molds and sculpts from the 1991 box set too, so they have not changed at all. The only time they really changed was when they made a feral orc release where they went to metal models. So these are the 3rd edition boyz, but there was a 4th edition in metal. Everything that I have purchased is from eBay. I don't have any of the original models that I bought when I was a child, so yes, I've had to pick up everything off eBay. But there's one big problem with eBay: you don't get to choose how the models were assembled. And as you can see, some of these models are pointing in all strange directions, and I don't really like not being able to have control over how I present the models. So we will be actually removing a majority of these models from their bases. To do this, you just need to use a pair of clippers and just be very careful not to snap the models while you're gripping the base. And I might show on video me doing it one time. It's very boring and very time consuming, but I think if we want to really do these models justice, we have to take our time and we have to present everything as well as possible. And by doing that, we're going to have to remove these models from these bases. There's no way of keeping the bases, they will be absolutely destroyed. I've tried dremeling from underneath and stuff like that, but you end up just warping the plastic and you might as well just start again. Also, because these models are so small and I don't want to cut any corners, I really want to dedicate my time fully to each model. And sometimes when they're in close proximity to each other like this, it's very hard to sort of get around the model, and I just want to be able to focus in on one model at a time and really do it justice. Also, with these storm boys at the end here, I want to actually have them flying off of the bases, so we're definitely going to have to get them off the base, no matter what. There we are, the green skin onslaughts that are the orcs. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did in recording the episode. But we must move onwards. Next up, Adeptus Titanicus. This is going to be a much shorter episode because I don't have too much Adeptus Titanicus stuff, but enough that warrants its own video, I'm sure. Anyway, I really appreciate you watching the video for this long, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing, and if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. But until next time, I've been Vincent, and this is Bunker 6.